Hello everyone and welcome to another Motorsport Magazine podcast in association with Mercedes-Benz. You can probably see that there are a few things a little bit different about today. First of all, that we're at the kennels at Goodwood, ahead of the revival, and we're not at Motorsport Magazine's base in Finchley. And you'll recognise not just one, but two familiar faces. Rob Widdows, a very warm welcome back to the podcast, and Jochen. I have a suspicion this might be quite a lively hour. Jochen, a very warm welcome. Thank you so much for sparing time. I mean, you've literally just flown in to be with us ahead of the revival, so thank you.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you, Ed. No, it's always a pleasure to talk to you guys.
And Rob, good to have you back.
I know, for one night only, I think.
We've managed to pull you away from your new venture of the Goodwood podcast, so thank you very much for joining us.
Oh, no problem. Yeah. It's great to be back. And
is it like a sort of Sky pundit joining the BBC team for a race?
Well, not exactly, no, but it's just great to be back because these podcasts are so good, aren't they? And you're doing lots of great people. And this is the fourth one you've done this week, I gather.
It is, yeah. Forgive the slightly jaded
That's
look.
That's
nice. But I've saved the best till last.
Yeah.
Jochen, we've got so many readers' questions. I've got lots of notes to sort of work through your career, but you did so much from touring cars, sports cars, Formula One. So we're going to have to try and dip in and out, otherwise we'll be here all afternoon.
Sure, yeah.
I'm sure you've got much better things to be doing. So I wanted to rewind right back to the beginning. And am I right that you started off on the sea and not on racetracks at all? Because you actually went into racing quite late, didn't you?
Glad somebody asked me this question. Yes, of course. I was on my way to become a sea captain, and then all changed suddenly because I got into contact with a hill climb race, and I got pulled away from my initial romanticism for the sea by the smell and the looks, and of course the noise and all that, and the whole atmosphere of racing. I mean, apart from that, I did like driving a car already, obviously. So, but racing had never occurred to me. But when I saw it finally and heard it, I thought, let's do that. Easy.
But quite quickly you were picked up by Ford, and you were offered, I think, sort of compared to what you're being paid before, a very generous contract. That must have been that was a massive step in your career. But it must have been,
look, no, not quite that easy. I mean, I had to come in and work first as a mechanic at an Alfa dealership. They had a race car, and that's what I wanted to drive. Somebody else drove it at the time, and so I bamboozled him into letting me have it eventually, and so on. So that's how it started. And the first races I did in '68, and then '69. I did a whole season of hill climbs, mainly. The odd Hockenheim and some other Ulm-Laubheim, which was an airfield race. That was circuit racing, but that for me it was as easy as hill climbs, everything. So it made no difference for me whether I drove on a circuit. Of course, you have to learn a little bit, just to behave in traffic and all that, but it came easy too, so it was not a problem.
And so then after when was it that the Ford's contract started?
End of '69, I had an invitation because I was always racing against the Fords. And I was always very close, but couldn't beat them because they had the Escort Twin Cam, which was actually a very good car. It was really far advanced over the Alphas, the 1600 GTAs. But I was close, I was always gnawing on their heels and so on. So they invited me to Zandvoort at the winter. And, with 30 drivers from Formula One, everybody was there. What Ford invited, Nerpasch, lots of Frenchies. And good guys, but there were 4 guys within 0.4 of a second, and I was one of them. So there was the 2 works drivers, Glemser and Moore, and of course Dr. Helmut Marko, who was also very gifted, very talented guy, and me, also very talented.
Obviously.
Anyway, so I got a contract very quickly, and then this, of course, happened. What you said, they made me a generous contract, but everything is generous after 150 marks a month. So that was basically what I earned on the boats. And so on. Yeah.
So you mentioned Helmut Marko there. I mean, I think sort of the vast majority of people nowadays know him as the Red Bull man. But actually he had a very successful driving career. I mean, as you said, he was very quick. I mean, what was he like sort of back then? Because he must have been a very different person to who he is now, certainly job-wise.
Helmut was a very, very great character. To me, he would have been the first Austrian world champion, for sure. Really? He had the talent, he had everything. We raced in South Africa against each other. I was with the Ford Prix still, so it wasn't in the same. He had a Lola 2-liter, and the following years then I drove the Chevron, but he wasn't in there anymore because he did already then Formula One. But he was very good with the ladies, so occasionally he came out of a massage situation in the hotels with a red cheek, both sides, because she slapped him. She said he's a very nice guy, but a bad character. But he was lovely. He was a great guy.
You mentioned the hill climbs. It's such a specific discipline, certainly nowadays, and even back then it was so different to circuit racing. What was it like racing on these hill climbs? Because they were even more dangerous than the circuits back then, which is saying something.
That may be so, but circuit racing was dangerous, if you like. Hill climbs, naturally, often there were no guardrails, no nothing, and but it taught you for sure a lot. And one thing definitely, focus on it from the word go, because you cannot make it up anywhere. What you've lost for good, and so on. So that made you, of course, very, very focused and very disciplined in your approach to racing. That was nice. I had a big accident once, and I was terribly lucky. When I think of it, I often thought about it. I was terribly lucky to survive that one. It sounds a bit corny, but it was exactly that. I bounced through a long right-hander with the alphas, with the rear axle. I was just dreaming away because I was first one with the greatest of ease, and the first run in practice, and the second run then this happened. And I bounced through it until I realized I was on an electric oversteer. It was too late. I couldn't catch the car, and I flew down the hillside. There were these enormous trees everywhere, and I hit one of them sideways, and I bent forward because my seatbelt had opened, luckily. So I was bending forward, and the tree hit me just behind. Had I sat like this, I don't think I would have survived it from the looks of the car and everything. So that was one of these guardian angels, which I had already then, and you must never forget that. And it taught me a lot, and so on. So that was but then, of course, you destroyed the car. And the guy said, the Alpha dealer said, if you wreck it, that's it. So I stood there and I climbed up, and he had to do a long detour to get to the top. And he came along because he was happy with the first run, and he looked at his head and said, how did it go? And he looked at my face, and he said, did you wreck it? I said, yeah. And the tears came out of my eyes. Seriously, I cried quietly because I thought, how goddamn stupid can you be? Now you have it, and now you had it suddenly. Then he stood there, was chewing his bottom lip for 20 minutes, and he said, well, then we built up the other one. We had another one in parts in the garden, lying there in the dealership. So we fixed that one. I continued racing, and I thought people like that you need, and they're amazing. They have obviously faith in what you're doing. So that this happened, sour grapes, but it happened. And somehow when you race, it can happen. It shouldn't, but it can. So I was very happy that he was so generous that he continued with me.
Jochen, can I ask you just at this point, all those experiences that you're describing were a tremendous foundation for the rest of your career, weren't they? And nowadays it's so different. If we think of someone like Verstappen at 18, he's in Formula One. But all those experiences, all those different things you did they eventually make you the driver you were?
Well, you have to see first what driver I became. I hope not, but no, I'm joking. It did, of course, but it forms the character. Yeah. And when I look at young Verstappen now with 18, he's a great kid. He's driving well, but he's driving reckless, and he has to learn a lot. And if he's given the time, he will turn into a very good driver, obviously. But I think it's a little too early. 18 years is a little too early and so on. So he will have some experiences still in his stairway upwards. So it's difficult.
Sorry, jumping forward again, you were doing lots of racing for Ford. How did the F3 drive come about, and why did you suddenly think, right, let's try single-seaters, or was that a bit of luck, or were you looking for it? Or?
No, not at all. Basically, a friend asked me in 71, I was nearly 25, I was 24 still, and he said, would you like to drive my Super V? I said, what's that? Seriously. And I said, I have no idea, never driven one, sat in a single-seater, never drove a go-kart, I had no idea. Then I drove a normal V, because the other one wasn't ready yet, in Hockenheim, and I thought, this is great, this really feels nice. And then the Super V was of course better, and then we had the first race, and I was leading most of the race, even though we went to bed at 5 in the morning, being silly. But of course then I paid for it then at the end, when I knew I shouldn't lead in Hockenheim with the long straights in the back, they will eat you up. When you get down to they did, of course. So I finished 4th or 5th, but just. But I knew I could do it, and it felt good. And then I was, racing in the so-called Gold Cup in Europe. And after half a season, we were in Finland. I was leading by a good margin. I won a few races. Sachsen I won Nürburgring, and I won quite a few others. I can't remember all of them, and then Ford called me while I was in Finland. It was Nerpash. And said, can you get out of your contract? We bought you Formula 3. So I relayed it to my friend, and he said, do it, it's great. So then I went to the UK and changed my license to a national one, which was not exactly in the rule book, but we could do it for some reason. Anyway, and then I did 6 races of the championship, and I finished 6, because I finished from 1st to 6th placings, in these 6 races, which was good. Put me on the map.
And you were racing in F3 alongside the likes of Hunt and Scheckter.
And Williamson. And
it was a golden era. There were so many golden eras in Formula 3. So,
but it was good. Yeah, no, it was absolutely sorry.
And but as you said, you took to single seaters very well. But was there a lot when you got put up against the likes of Scheckter and Hunt? Was there a time when you thought, oh, I've got quite a lot to learn here? Was it because it seems very natural from your results and what you managed getting into cars straight away?
Yeah, no, I didn't feel I had to learn a lot. I felt I was up to it. And what I wasn't so sure about was setting up the car right, whether I've been doing the right things or not sometimes. That made me sometimes quicker, sometimes slower. Plus the engines varied a bit. They had the Nova engines, which were good. But, sometimes Williams had a better motor, we assumed, because I think Wheatcroft spent quite a lot of money on him because he loved the guy. And Scheckter was like me, up and down, depending on, and the track too. And, so sometimes I could beat him, was Castle Combe, and occasionally some other race where I finished ahead of Jody, and on Williamson had gone, or I was just behind him, or things like that. So I remember one race in Silverstone. Williamson had taken off and he was gone, and I was with a bunch of the cars. The peloton, as the French would say. And so we were paddling along happily, and I thought being first of that group is like winning the race. So that's what I did, just sort of they homed in on me and so on. And, the first guys, nobody wants the other guy to overtake you easily, but I managed to get by them, and so I finished second after Williamson, which was good. And that gave me a lot of confidence too, because I knew I could do it. And then the following year, of course, when we did Monaco, the first time, there were 80 cars, 20 were allowed to run, and so on. So we had to qualify always through the various practice sessions. And then finally I had to do 2 qualifying races, or 1 rather, but 2 heaps of cars, and the first 10 of each managed to get into the final. So I was last on the grid, pouring with rain, and I hit the curb here and I hit the curb there, and the guardrail there lightly. My mechanic was all, he said, Mass. It was a lovely guy from Denmark, Gunnar, a great guy. And he was like the Great Dane, he just looked around and nobody dared to get close to the car because it looked like it was going to bite any minute. And I took 11 cars in the first lap in the rain, And third lap I was in fourth place. And the second and third had tangled up in Mirabeau and they stopped. And we all came just about to a halt. And one of them backed up and drove over my nose because I was the first one behind him. So I had a quick pit stop, but it dropped me back to seventh and I had lost my wings. So it wasn't, but I think I would have won that quite easily. Looked like it.
They were great races, weren't they? They were great.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, yeah.
Do you, I mean, of all the things that you raced, do you look back on that time as particularly fondly? Because the racing was so good. And, you know, there were good names, there were good drivers in there. All the cars are quite evenly matched. Surely it must have been some of the best racing you had.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. No, look, I mean, you worked upwards. You could see the road going this way. And, of course, it was nice. It was, you know, everything was fresh. And every race was a new venture. Oh, you know, Nürburgring in the rain again. And I was running only on 3 cylinders because there was some water accumulating in the plug holder. And but then everybody went round the Südkehre, which was still the long loop, the long right-hand sort of corner, and then started run again. Everybody went down to the inside, into the water. I was passing everybody around the top. And so I was first. I had the whole Nürburgring for myself. And I came back after one lap, and they all looked at me, and I couldn't see anything on the tower. I couldn't see any signs or anything. I had a 1 minute lead. I had a 1 minute lead after one lap.
Wow.
And then I spun, but I didn't know. So I spun at Brünchen, I had some aquaplaning, but didn't stall. Yeah, I stalled the engines, but it didn't hit anything. Just sort of sat there on the side of the road and looking up to the corner where they should have appeared any second. And we still had batteries, and it coughed back into life. And I plugged it in the first gear carefully and continued. 1 minute, 10 seconds. And so on. So that was nice. I won with a second. With a minute at the end, with a broken right rear suspension, needing the whole road. But you know, it was good. Things like that, of course, you never forget, and you know you can do it. You know that you have a little more than most of the others. So.
We've got lots of readers' questions, so I'll come on to those in a second. But we just mentioned James Hunt, who you met sort of Formula 3 time. But obviously, he sort of came back into your life again when you were at McLaren, and he joined McLaren for that famous '76 season. You were firm friends. What was he like in F3, and then when you got to F1? Was he very much the same person between those two times, or was he sort of a bigger character when you got to Formula 1?
No, he was pretty much the same. Well, he got a bigger character then, of course. Once he joined Heskes and he won a race, then he became... And as the popularity grew around him and all that, he felt he had to live up to it. And so sometimes it led him into some silly things, which we could laugh about, but you could also look at it with a sort of a doubtful eye whether that's the best thing for him in the long run. I said, what are you trying to run after? And so on. We sometimes talked about it, and he just laughed and so on. But, I knew him from before, but I saw him one night. I entered from Germany with my Ford Capri at the time going into London. I had rented a little flat, Lansdowne Road, opposite Holland Park. Anyway, so I was on my way there, and suddenly from the side street, without any sort of looking anywhere, a Porsche came out sideways, I thought, it can only be James, the way he drove. So I followed him somewhere, and then I looked. Of course it was James, so we went to his place. And it was a lively evening. It wasn't evening anymore, it was a lively night. But,
they were different days, weren't they?
Definitely.
Yeah.
The Capri, I was going to come on to this later, but your first Le Mans was in a V6 Capri, wasn't it? And you
That's
left
right.
absolutely hating it. Or did you hate it before you went to Le Mans?
No. 72 was the first time. And of course we drove with the Ford Caprice, but it was first time confronted with this field of sports prototypes, and us with a car which was quick, all right, but not as quick, was 50, 60, 70 kilometers slower than the prototypes. So then you were constantly glued. You didn't want to make a nuisance of yourself, and you try to be out of the way drive on the sensible side so that you're not in the way of these Matras and Alphas and Ferraris and Porsches, and you thought, damn, there's another one coming. And I was just at the end of, the air was going right into the Mille Sun, And I saw these cars, these lights coming up very quick. And it was a bunch of 4 cars. Marco was one of them. And, I stopped on the left, and I sort of half turned, and I stopped. And Marco was spinning, and he just missed me with his nose to my car. Would have not done great damage, but anyway. So still stopped, and I waved him. I said, "Yeah, it's all yours." So they took off, and I thought, damn it. Anyway, and then through the night, and it was not really very pleasant. And it was not the racing as such, because you couldn't really race properly. To me, there wasn't a non-event in terms of racing, It was not the 24 hours which irked me or anything like that, just a mixture of cars. And of course, I just met Joachim Bonnier early on, a few weeks earlier at Jackie Stewart's house. And he got killed the night running over some Ferrari. In the Mulsanne coming down in this fast right-hander sort of, can't even blame the Ferrari guy either, because it was just the nature of the race. And as a faster car driver, you were responsible for all your actions more than the other guy. I mean, there was a responsibility for both, naturally. But on the other hand, you're the faster one, and sometimes the guy is so occupied with his own line and behavior of his car that he's unaware of that you're coming up at such a great different speed. So it was very bad.
Was it a better experience when you got into the leading cars? You got into the really quick cars at Le Mans?
Oh, that was easy. Talking about that, it was nice, but I'm not quite finished with this Ford Capri race, because down the straight at 6 in the morning or 5 in the morning, I thought, I wish the damn thing would blow up, because it was and it did. I didn't ref it or anything. I didn't force it. Then I slowly made my way back to the pits, and I said,
I'm so sorry.
It's broken. Singing it rather than saying it. And they said, then you drive the other one. Oh, I thought, no. And then Jerry came up quickly, and he said, don't you want to drive? I said, would you like to? He said, yeah, of course I would. So he drove it, and it was nice. And I won their class, so it was okay. But the class win in in Le Mans is not exactly a very valuable one. Manufacturers can make something of it, say won the class, but nobody looks at it twice, this sort of thing.
For those,
it's different now. I must put that on. It's different now. So when you have a class win now and it's hotly contested, different groups, that's different. But it wasn't then hotly contested. We were sort of trying to be polite.
Yeah, stay out of the way. For those of you watching on the video, you might have seen us all jump then. That's not because someone's been shot down here at Goodwood. That was just a door slamming. Otherwise it would look very strange. Just all three of us going, oh.
Yes,
They're not sort of electric seats or anything. Jochen, I'm going to take some readers' questions.
Yeah.
And I've got one here from Lucio Chiodi. I think I've pronounced that right. You shared the car with so many drivers. Who do you think was the best of your teammates? And with whom did you most enjoy racing together?
It's the one I drove longest with was Jackie X, and I really loved him. Great kid, wonderful co-pilot, or if you want a team partner. It was really a team partner. It was not there was no competition between us as such. Sometimes I was quicker, sometimes he was quicker. We had no problems with that. And of course I drove with Jackie Stewart, not now. I drove with Scheckter, with the Capri still. I drove with Larousse. I drove with Marseille, I think, as well. With Fitzpatrick, with... they were all nice. They were all nice. We never had any misgiving. I never had a very unpleasant sort of team partner. I couldn't think of one. I had more difficult ones, like much later, if you like, in the forms of Michael Schumacher, who wouldn't leave a car alone. I mean, at night, when I said, leave the car, it's good, he said, well, maybe we can do something. And I said, what? He said, well, I don't know, but maybe we can improve it. And so on. At 10 o'clock at night, he was still at it. And I thought, just leave it alone, because that's irksome for somebody who's 20 years old. But, he never changed it to the worse, so it was okay. I don't think he ever gained much by doing that, but that's the way his mind ticked, and that's the way he worked.
I think you've just answered Andrew Oates' question. Bob Spry's question. He was asking were there any co-drivers who drove you mad. I guess Michael Schumacher would be that one then.
It would have been, yes, exactly.
Well, this was sort of near the end of your career, and you were a mentor to that trio of cyber Mercedes drivers, Frentzen, Wendlinger, and Schumacher. You were talking a little bit about Michael there. Could you tell even then that he was different? Had something else?
Oh yeah, I could tell that. Yes, everybody could see that he was different. He was more meticulous. He didn't seem to be outwardly that much quicker than the others, because they all reached about the same time after some lapses. But the freshest and the easiest one seemed Frentzen, driving-wise. But Frentzen was a happy-go-lucky guy, more sort of in my line, quick, but didn't reflect too much on it. But Michael always worked on it, and then at the end he knew why he was quick and how he could improve and so on. So he always honed his driving or his style and, suited to the car best and all that. And he wanted the car to be driven in a very specific way. Sometimes after race we got back and he said, "Are you coming go-karting tomorrow?" I said, "Don't you want to rest today?" He said, "No, let's go go-karting." So, and then he drove. I drove a few laps and he laughed himself silly over that. And I was quick in the quick corners when you didn't have to back off. But I was not so quick in the technical end, with left and right and all that. But then I took times and he wanted to see what was quicker, what was better, in various sections. And I said, "Well, here you improved, there you lost a bit." And I could see, he said, "I want to drive my Formula One like that. I want to adjust the Ferrari to this sort of go-kart driving style." And that's what he did. He braked left and he was already then on the throttle and he kept it sort of on a constant slide. And I could see it, but to do is another thing. I could, in the beginning, I remember one particular race with the GTA with the 1300 in Zolder, driving against the Mini, which was from Woodhouse in Hamburg. Christian Schmeier, very quick car, good driver too. But anyway, so I drove, and I had these funny driving shoes, which are leather socks, if you like. And I braked, and I had my side of my foot on the throttle at the same time, and I could drive it like this. And it was exactly, that's what they later did, driving like that with the left and the right. And, but I could sense it then that this was the right way of doing it. It was perfect, you got it in and you held it with half your foot and all that. And, later we never had the option of driving it always because of the different cars, different pedals often. It didn't always work the same way. And later with the brake on the left and left foot braking generally made it all different.
Jumping back again, sorry, there's lots of jumping around, but we'll probably get quite good at it by the time we finished. The move into Formula One, putting aside the first race at Silverstone where there was the big pile-up, you then went to the Nürburgring, and I think didn't you pass 5 cars on your first lap? You must have thought at that point, what's everyone doing? This is easy.
I don't remember how many I passed at some stage. Funny enough, I remember that it was pleasant. The car was good. So this was not bad, this TS14. It felt good. And, at the end, I realized that I was quicker than some others in the Schwalbenschwanz and the following Galgenkopf onto the long straight. And I felt I could overtake Emerson with the Lotus. He was going slower there, and he was really much slower by Galgenkopf for whatever reason. And I was taking it nearly flat. I backed a little bit, and that was it. And he braked and so on. But then suddenly, last lap, somebody got stuck there, spun. So there was lots of flags, and so I had to back off anyway. And then he accelerated first, so I couldn't get him anymore on the straight. So otherwise, there would have been the points. There would have been 6 instead of him. And then Jackie Oliver was all upset because he wanted to overtake me, and I saw him. And I moved over a little bit to block him. And then in the old Fahrerlager at Nürburgring, he said, "You're Jochen Mass?" I said, "Yes." He said, "You nearly drove me in the wall." I said, "You mean the hedge? There's no wall." I said, and so on. So he was not very happy about it, but he accepted it, of course. But I said, but look, it's the last lap. I had to brake because of Emerson and da-da-da. I said, that's the way it was. So he accepted it in a way. He was not very happy, but he was okay.
I guess local knowledge is a big thing at the Nürburgring, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah, and now you have to... I mean, all the guys who drove there were pretty good at the ring, obviously, and so on. It's just some liked it better, and some had probably absorbed it. I mean, we all did many races there, so it was not that I was that much sort of advanced because I knew better. But I think I imbibed really the rhythm and the characteristics of the Nordschleife better perhaps than most others. And that was interesting to see. 75, I felt I win the race, first lap. And I was forced down the foxhole. And then my right front delaminated completely because they put an old type tire on the right front. And for the end of my days, I will not know why. They could never answer that question. They said, we don't know, this sort of thing. Because they brought in a whole jumbo load full of tires because they were not capable of doing a lap without blowing up one way or the other in practice. So we very nearly didn't have a race altogether. So then they came up with these new tires and they lasted, they were good, except the one didn't. And that was in the foxhole. If you go through it flat out with 280, and then you go flop, 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 suddenly this thing come apart. Not funny. And then, of course, you have a left-hander, so I crashed quite hard. And, of course, then I got out of my heap of McLaren, M23, which was not recognizable as such. And the guys, the spectators, idiot, can't you go slow in the first lap? Because they didn't know what happened. They just saw me crashing, and I was disappointed, of course. Because in practice, I was second quickest behind Nicky on Friday by 2/10. He was just under 6 minutes or 7 minutes. I was just over, 10. So we were 2/10 apart. 60,000 more people turned up just because of that.
I believe it, absolutely.
And that was a pity because you disappoint so many people when things like that happen. And I felt I could have won. And of course, following year, same story. I was in the lead. I would have won it, for sure. Then Nicky's accident stopped it all. And then I finished third at the end. Anyway, it's a different story. But
the German Grand Prix would love an extra 60,000 tickets on their door come race day nowadays.
But they had 250,000 already anyway. They had lots of people.
In those days,
there's such big stands that you actually, it doesn't look like that. We're going to come on to touring cars, more Le Mans, more readers' questions in a second. But for the readers, we have a special offer for you from Mercedes-Benz. You get 10% off everything on their shop, on merchandise from F1 clothing to children's toys. All you need to do is go to shop.mercedes-benz.com and use the voucher code autumn-10 and you get 10% off. You can't use that voucher code with any other, and it's valid until the 1st of November. But make use of it. There's lots of cool stuff on there, and you get 10% off, which is, can't argue with that. It's always nice to have a discount.
Absolutely.
Jochen, coming back to the touring cars, and that time, obviously a lot of F1 drivers actually came and raced the Capris and things like that. And some obviously were a lot better than others. But you raced with Jackie Stewart. Was he quite good in a Capri, or
he was excellent? I mean, he was this bloody Scotsman. He was never driving this Capris, if you like, and he came along at the Nürburgring, and he had his Goodyear tires. Had to have it because he had his contract, and we were all on Dunlops. And then Jackie came. I was a little bit quicker than him, 2 seconds or whatever, and so he went up to Carnefus and he said, "Can Jochen perhaps try my car? Because I'm not sure if it's right, because anyway, why is Jochen, maybe his car's a bit quicker, I want to see that." So I did one of these short laps, which means, I didn't do a whole lap to come back and do one flying lap, and so on. So this is normally a little bit slower than if it would come from the Antoniusbuche, past the straight, because they have a greater speed. Then if you go this little concrete loop around the tower, and then you start from there, just where the pit entry is. And so on, so you're still in the accelerating phase, there much more. Anyway, so I came round, I did a lap, and the car felt for me pretty good. And I was again a little bit quicker than him. So he said, must be me then. And it impressed me to no end. I mean, how he handled the car and how he was such a professional, wonderful. Emerson was 25 seconds behind him, and with him, in the same car, 25 seconds. Yeah. But Emerson never got very warm with these sort of cars. He was splendid, of course, with single seaters, but at the Nürburgring he took it a little bit, let's say, with a little too much respect, maybe. I don't know, but
I think I would have been 25 minutes behind everyone, somewhere like that.
No, Jackie Stewart, so he impressed me a lot. Scheckter was very quick, needless to say, and so on. So we were all pretty much a group, even Larousse was quick, and Alex Soloroig, and so on. So they were all quite good, quick. Klemser was very fast.
Jackie was an absolute master of the Nordschleife there, wasn't he? I mean, some of those laps he did, especially in wet weather, just out of this world.
He was so analytical, it was amazing. And he realized that was something which I looked upon with the greatest of respect. And I thought, that's how you have to drive. Peter Revson was another one who was also very clean and sweet and, totally unspectacular. And Jackie was only spectacular because he was so quick. And so at the Nürburgring he flew sometimes because he was at the speed. But, he was not spectacular in terms of sideways and all that. He was avoiding all this, and he knew that was the quickest way. And I felt exactly the same. So instinctively I learned a lot from these guys, how they drove their cars.
We've got a question here from Matt, who wanted to ask you about Carlos Pache. And what was he like to have in the same team, and what do you think he could have achieved if he didn't leave us prematurely?
Carlos was a great guy. He was very gifted, very talented. He drove very well. He was a lovely boy. I mean, he was a very nice man. I liked him a lot. And he was also very quickly disappointed because with the performance of the Surtees cars in that particular year. And so on. So when he left the team, then he drove some, later he was, when he drove the Brabham, which was obviously then he won the race in Brazil and all that. So then you could see how good he really was. And you always need the best car or a very good car to prove that. No, Carlos was a lovely guy. And of course, when he crashed in this plane, which was outright dumb, because...
There's a lot going on in here, right?
Well, it is the beginning of the Goodwood revival, so I think everyone's a little bit overexcited.
I think our dog chased them.
Sorry, Jochen, carry on.
So anyway, when he had his flying lesson, he was with his teacher, and they flew right into a thundercloud, but a heavy thunderstorm. Nobody else flew, but they took off in the city airport of Sao Paulo and right into the thundercloud. Of course, then they had no chance. It just hits you on the head and then you go down in a great hurry. So nobody understood why his instructor, did it. I mean, anyway, so sad story. But he was a very gifted, one of the many gifted Brazilian drivers.
I've got a question here about Spanish Grand Prix in 75, Grand Prix win, and Le Mans 89. And Andrew is wondering which gave you more satisfaction. I'm guessing Le Mans. Over.
Not a wild guess. It's not a wild guess, no. It's pretty accurately, assumed. No. Look, I mean, the Grand Prix in Barcelona Montjuic was a beautiful circuit. It was not a circuit, but a city circuit like Monaco. In fact, I think it was even nicer than Monaco because it was more fluent and it was sort of at different corners, different types, similar in a way, but to me almost better. And when this tragic accident happened with Stommelen and Pache, again, they were touching, we had tried to boycott the race. All the drivers wanted to. They said, no, we're not going to drive because the guardrails were not bolted onto their stanchions there. I mean, they were just sort of, the nuts were all missing in the back. The screws were in, but the nuts were not on in the back. So all the teams, even some drivers, went around and tried to fix as many as they could. And the most obvious places where you needed them, specifically, and so on. So that accident finally had nothing to do with the relative insecurity. There was a group of people, about journalists, photographers, who had nothing really to do other than watching it on that particular spot. And of course, when Stormland got airborne and was launched over the Armco, that's what happens. When, much later, Gilles Villeneuve went over Ronnie's wheels in Japan, and he also flew into a bunch of, again, journalists and photographers, killed a few. It was terrible. And that's the difference when you look at the older beautiful pictures of Banacaye or whatever, who were taken right there. Lots of photographers did that, standing right next on the inside of the line and all that, in Monaco and many other racetracks. Fabulous in Formula One racing. And you got the most beautiful shots there. But later you couldn't do it anymore because of obvious speeds and all that.
You know what? It was also the same for the fans, as well, and all of us who love racing. Because I think that how close we could get in those days was part of the excitement, actually. Because you could really sense the speed and the skill, and now at a lot of tracks it's a long way away.
All tracks, except Monaco. But you sit behind this sky-high fence, which I understand, of course. But that's what attracted us in the first place. Yeah. You go to a race and you see it from close. I mean, it happens at Pflanzgarten. I mean, they came out of the woods. I remember because you had two announcers, and the two commentators, and one was in Breitscheid, which was sort of not halfway, but anyway. But he told you who was leading and so on, and then you could hear sometimes through the topography of the Nürburgring, you could hear the noise a bit stifled and a bit louder of the cars coming, and then were gone again because they were behind the hills, and then you stared up into this sort of entry corner for the Pflanzgarten. And suddenly they broke out of the woods. I mean, they came out like a thundercloud. I mean, they came out, and they came down and they slowed down a little bit for this little dip, and then the following double right-hander. Magic. It was so exciting to see, and you close up and you could see the guys steering this way, that way, and so on, and the differences between the one or the other. Oh yeah, magic, and that is missing today. I mean, they go so fast. Anyway, yeah.
There's a really lovely video I saw on Facebook recently, and there's a kid who can only be 4 or 5 years old, and he's at a superbike race, I think, and all the bikes set off, and as they come past, the kid gets so excited he just starts screaming and jumping up and down as all the bikes pass, and then he calms down again once they've all gone. It happens again, and it's just but that's what you want to see, That's how you get kids into it.
Yeah, that's fabulous.
So moving back to F1, teammates with Hunt in 76, and I'd read, I think it was actually in Motorsport, that you could stay with him on the corners, but on the straights he would always pull away, and you later discovered that he was getting better engines than you. Is that right?
Number one guys always had a better engine.
There were three of them, weren't there? Number one.
Yeah, that's of course, you heard the story sort of around the back corners. Keith Duckworth told me many years later, he said, "You guys never had a chance." I said, "Explain." And he told me that. He said they had up to 70 horsepower more. They were making these Evolution engines, but they expected money from Ford to make them for everybody. So they kept it top secret. Not even the team bosses knew that. Teddy Mayer or whoever. And I spoke to Alistair Caldwell about it, and he said, never happened. Because even the spec sheets they got from the test beds were about 14, 15 horsepower more, 18 maybe. Yeah, which was already quite a number, but nevertheless was manageable. And so I said, well, Keith Duckworth unfortunately passed away in the meantime, so we can't talk to him about it. But I know what he told me, and I believe it, because those three guys from one point onwards, Andretti, Scheckter, and Hunt, they lapped everybody. And we all thought, how is that? What's happening? And so on. So it was quite annoying, that we didn't come to terms with that, and in terms of understanding why suddenly we looked at the cars, and I mean, my teammates' car.
It's so interesting to hear you talk about that now in 2016, isn't it? Because at the time we were all thinking, what the hell's going on here? What? Yeah.
And apart from the deficit in horsepower you had, that car was a lovely car to drive, wasn't it?
Well, the M23 was good, sure. The M25, M26 then had a small deficiency. They were not as good anymore. I mean, but with the horsepower, you could win a race, which you did, and so on. So, but the M23 was a wonderful car. Gordon Koppuk was a fantastic, conscientious designer. I mean, that car, don't forget, it ran for 4 years almost. And it was always good. And it was a safe car, so you had faith in it, which was nice. It wasn't always the same with some other cars I drove. Namely a certain ATS, which is, if you translate it, into German, it's all parts shit. Alle Teile Scheiße. So that was a pity. The first year, especially with that team, so that was not good.
No.
I'm going to go back to the readers' questions. There's quite a nice one here from Stevie Mitchell about you racing at Silverstone 6 hours in the Porsche 935, the Moby Dick car. Apparently that lapped only 4 seconds slower than F1 from the previous year. What were those 935s like to drive? They must have been quite... must have kept you on your toes, I think is the right phrase.
To say the least. It was a car which I didn't like, for example, at the Nürburgring, because it was a very potent car, very strong, but it didn't have the handling to match. I mean, it handled good on most circuits, but on some other ones it was, you had to be aware of it. I mean, I loved battling it, but it was not a nice race car as such. It was too brutal. It was a little too heavy, and it was a little bit too big and too powerful, with 800 plus horsepower. I mean, it was a handful sometimes, but it was nevertheless a very good race car. And of course, tracks like Silverstone, where you could really floor it and sort of, of course it was quick. It was probably quicker in some sections, straights especially, of course, than the Formula One cars with so much power. For example, I drove in '94. I drove the Williams Prost's World Championship car, and the car was fantastic. And I was doing Signe flat 347, lap after lap was easy because the car was so damn good. It was unbelievable. In the same corner, 3 years earlier, in '91, with a 291 Sauber, I did 352, also flat, easy. So the sports cars and the Formula One cars were pretty close. And of course we had later than the 956s and 962s were a lot better than 936s, which was already quicker than the 935. But 935 to me was a great race car, but it was not my favorite.
And you mentioned that the later Porsches, the 956 and 962, I mean, they were, correct me if I'm wrong, I mean, they were great cars, weren't they? I mean, they won so many races, and they must have been quite a change going from something like the 935 through the 936 and then getting to the 956 and 962.
Yeah, well, it was a distinct difference, but yet, it didn't really bother me much because we drove them all the time, forwards, backwards. So we had a 6 hour race 6 hours on Saturday in Dijon. And then we had a 1,000-kilometer race on Sunday with the 936. So you raced the one, then you practice after that, still till 7 o'clock in the evening. And then you raced the 936. And so the difference in cars, it was a race car. And I mean, they were both very good. One was a little more of a handful, but you can live with that easily. And so on. So that was good. We won both races, which was nice.
Did you get paid twice?
Oh, I forgot to ask.
Then obviously in sports cars, you then went on to side Mercedes and the C cars. Were they a big step up from a 962 in terms of downforce and how tiring they were to drive? Because I think I read somewhere that was the big thing for you.
It was a new generation of cars. It was a new generation of aerodynamics, new generation of chassis building. So it was altogether a more modern machine. I mean, the 962s in the first year in '88 and even '89 were still competitive for the simple reason they were running on better tires. We were still running the Michelins, which were not very compatible with a higher downforce car because the sidewalls were too soft and so on. They're not bad race tires, if you like, but the sidewalls, as we later saw in Formula One and Indy, and so on, where they had to step back, and that's not good, and they never wanted to change it. And when we won it in '89, '88 we pulled out because of that, and in '89 we did endless tests in Clermont-Ferrand on their track, and I ran and ever-increasing speeds over this sort of measuring device, which measured the amount of downforce in weight you created. So we reduced all the time. And they told me that in ever so many words, Jochen, you must change the downforce, you're too heavy, blah, blah, blah. And I said, yeah, but why don't you make a stiffer tire? Maybe that would help too. But it's against the philosophy in the company. So they can, later when they had the super flat ones, it played less of a role. But then the tire sidewalls were still quite high, so it wasn't very good. But anyway, we won it. But I had, really in the slower parts, I had trouble to keep Stuck behind me with the Porsche. And of course on the straight I just drove away because we were a lot quicker down the straight. But so that's why we won it. But only then when we changed later to good years we were far better off. But yeah.
We've still got another 5-10 minutes. So I'm going to squeeze in a couple more readers' questions because so many have come in. I must ask them.
Did you know you had so many fans?
So far I could count to 10.
Well, there are more than that on this sheet, Jochen. Here we go. For Jamie Smith, I'm a Jochen Mass fan, he starts. So there's a question here from Diego Ruiz, or Ruiz, probably. Greetings, Mr. Mass. Which is the most difficult circuit to drive at night? Perhaps Spa, question mark?
No, I don't think so, no. Spa, what it was then, perhaps, the old Spa. Fast track, but Le Mans was always a bit difficult. It was pitch black. It is pitch black at night. There's no light in any corner except close to the pits again. And even now at the classic, you still struggle if you don't know the track well. You have a problem. I drove with Brian Johnson, and the first time it wasn't Le Mans, the first time in a Porsche, and then in the rain. You can imagine it was bleep, 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 bleep. We couldn't say much. But anyway, the most difficult circuit at night to me was perhaps Le Mans because the high speeds and you see things a bit too late. Because when you arrive at nearly 400 and you see something lying there, you can't avoid it. You go over it because you can't just suddenly jerk to one side or the other. Forget it. You just hope for the best. And that's it. So it's... the old Spa, we only did with touring cars, not with the super sports cars. They never drove at night in Spa. So that was quite a handful. I loved it because it was fast and it was, from Bournonville onwards, this long right-hander, and then all the way down to Stavro. It was all flat. Mazda King was flat and all that, 270, 280, and just, sort of. And I remember I was getting in there, having a slow puncture, luckily, on the right rear. So it started to oversteer going in at that speed, and then it came round the other way and I couldn't stop it from spinning, and I spun 6 times down the road without hitting anything, just mildly kissed the guardrail, which broke my rear lights. And of course, then one of the marshals came along and he said, "You got a puncture." I said, "Thank you, I know that." So I continued. But, we won the race anyway, but... interesting in the night races. When I look at Daytona, at the time it was also quite a handful because you didn't have so many lights what you have today. And I remember we had the wrong tires again for Daytona. The non-American tires are not built for high speed, high bank corners. So my right rear blew and I spun around quite a lot and I dipped out in the bottom there and I broke my oil cooler, and while I spun the car twisted so much. It was the 935 and my right door dislodged itself and flew away. So I had no door. I said, okay, we fix the oil cooler and then we search for a door, just drive without one. So I drove in the night with a very drafty machine, and there was only one light, and after the dog leg there's a horseshoe and the dog leg, and then you have a right hand, and that was a big spotlight high up, and there was just no other car around me, and I was going round, and suddenly something black shot past me on the side in the open door there, and I got such a start. I thought I'd overlooked somebody, and I really got a shock in that moment. It was my own shadow. Yeah, so that's the trouble when you don't have doors.
That's a great story, isn't it?
Yeah. I was wondering. So talking about accidents, there was it the Paul Ricard's accident in F1 that was that when you decided enough was enough in Formula One, or was that decision a sort of a bigger?
No, we had, of course, the Villeneuve accident in '82, and then afterwards I had an accident which could have cost me dearly, and luckily I had nothing, or as good as nothing, and that really woke me up or rattled me, and I said, forget it, team's no good. They nicked all the money I brought with Rossmann's and so on, and they never paid me a sou, nor did Curtis, by the way, but we don't want to talk about that. But he didn't have any to begin with. The other ones did have, but they had to plug up a lot of holes from the previous years. The usual thing in Formula One, often, and that's the way it was, and so on. So then I decided to stop and continue with the sports cars. Not that I thought they were so much safer, but at least they were less intense, because you did 6 hours or 24 hours or whatever, 1,000 kilometers, and occasionally a 500-kilometer race. So you took it a little more with a grain of salt, a little bit easier, and you were not always flat out like in Formula One. So for that it was a bit, and the cars were built a little better in terms of breakages. When you hit something, it was equally bad, because you sat quite far forward. The Sauber Mercedes were by nature better, because the cars were stronger built, and C11, of course, carbon, would have been a lot stronger at an impact. Fortunately, we never found out that way.
A question from me, actually, rather than the readers. Obviously, having stopped racing professionally, you now race lots of amazing historic cars, pre-war Grand Prix cars, later cars. If you were to be asked to take one car to a circuit, what would you take? Would you take something from your professional career, or would you maybe take an Auto Union, and where would you go? Where would you go with it?
No. I want to take a car which I didn't race in my active years. Okay. And, I love these cars from before my time. This because these were the machines which intrigued me when I looked at them. And I really was drooling over E-types or over GT40s or whatever. And they were fantastic machines. The 906s, 910s, Porsches, 904s. First I saw it in the magazines, it's called Hobby magazine, and it was a German race car made out of GFK, and it looked good, and it was quick, and I drove one not so long ago, and I loved it immediately. I thought, what a damn nice car, and so on. So, and of course the races, Targa Florios, the Millimilias, it was fantastic. No, Millimilias not so much, they were stopped in 58, but the Targa Florio was particularly interesting, and that was amazing. And I regret in a way that this sort of slipped through my fingers, because I was too young in racing. I didn't get a chance to drive that before this halted it as well. But to drive, if I would take a particular car now, if it would have been a car from my race days, it would be one of the Saubers, and of course the Formula 2.
Yeah, we
marches with the BMW engines.
Over that with all the stuff we've been talking about.
And of course the 30s Formula 2 was a magnificent car. It's a lovely car. We suffered a little bit from the lack of horsepower compared to the BMWs, lack of torque as well. But I think the 30s with a BMW engine probably would have been a better car than even the March. So, but pretty academic, we could never do that. But I did a few races with the Formula 2s, with the March Formula 2 with the BMW engines, and I think I won them. It was Hockenheim once or twice, and Nürburgring, and so on. So that was commode, as the French would say. It was nice and easy. Cars were great. But I loved the Formula 2s because the relationship between horsepower and handling was perfect. And when you have a very powerful car, you go too quick, on the straights. You have to brake harder, and they're sort of out of balance, like the Formula 5000 cars. They could never find the right sort of beautiful balance, which a less powerful car might have had. A good Formula 1 was better, of course, for that reason too, over a Formula 5000. Less weight to begin with, but it also from the power relationship to the handling was much better.
So you take a Formula 2 car to Nürburgring?
I tell you what, I would love to drive this Williams, for an example, which I was happy to drive for 20 laps in Le Castellet at the Nürburgring, at the Nordschleife. I would have loved it. It would have been such a nice car to drive there. Yeah, I know. It's pretty hallucinating.
Why not?
Let's keep on dreaming. That's great.
Right, yeah.
Jochen, thank you so much for such an entertaining, fascinating hour. And Rob, thank you so much for joining us. It's great to have you back, and hopefully we'll have you back again very soon.
Great to be here. Thank you, and thank you, Jochen.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Jochen,
Rob. Thanks,
very
Ed.
kind. We'll see all of you next month for another Motorsport Magazine podcast in association with Mercedes-Benz. Bye-bye for now.